Hi, Helen.
Hi.
How are you doing?
Good.
Good to see you.
Thanks.
Well, your name, we don't see you.
Helen Dulac.
Helen Katzen
Helen Katzen, right in the middle.
Helen Dulac.
and Ellen Dulac. Oh, Helen.
Oh, there's
Well,
Helen.
Helen Dulac has her picture there.
Hey,
So
LeBeau, how are you?
I'm okay. How are you doing?
I can't complain because of two reasons. Number one, it doesn't do any good. And number two, life is not that bad.
I agree.
You weren't at my house Saturday night. I mean, Friday night, sorry.
Okay, well, I see by my watch that it's 7 o'clock.
The chime has not happened yet.
Okay,
Oh, it's-
we'll wait for John's grandfather clock to chime. It better be soon or else it's slow.
Just give it a few seconds. Now, go on ahead. I'm teasing you.
Okay,
So,
welcome everybody to the monthly general meeting of the Dallas Sierra Club Group. Tonight, oh, John is putting up some graphics. We've just completed our pre-meeting social gathering. We're now doing the introduction and welcome from me. And I will mention that we have with us this evening the new director of the Lone Star chapter, Dave Cortez, who's going to talk to us about a near and dear subject to all our hearts, the Texas electric grid. So that should be something you all want to listen to.
North Korea test fired a missile. Well, tonight the FAA is now acknowledging
let me take.
but they said the matter is under review. Tonight, Gio Benitez will be on.
Somebody's got their TV on. They ought to mute themselves. Mute yourself if you're not talking, okay? Thank you. Let's move to our committee reports. And we'll start with Victoria. You're here. Do you have anything you want to report on for Conservation/Eco Action Committee?
Yes, Dan, just super briefly, I wanted to thank everyone for all of those who put in written comments and showed up to the TCEQ public hearing last night about the proposed batch plant 1 mile from the Heard Museum in McKinney. So I will keep everyone posted. Hopefully we will hear within the next month. And extra hopefully, we will hear that they decided to deny the permit. Fingers crossed. So thank you everyone for coming out and showing up. And Dan, that is all I have for today.
Okay, well, it says upcoming programs, so we'll let you and Renee tell us about next month's program.
Renee is the lady in the know. Renee is going to be the one that tells you.
Okay, Renee, what happens next month for a program?
Well, next month it was supposed to be Kathy Jack and Kent Roberts, but I got an email, I think that came from Wendell. A better thing to do is let them do March and let Liz show pictures and do a report on outings, because by March, I mean by February, we will have the outings. Is that a better plan, everybody think?
Well, to me, it depends on if the people that committed for next month are willing to do it that way. If they don't like that, then I think we should stay with our commitment.
Oh, they won't mind. They're very flexible when I talk to them.
Okay.
They'll be very flexible.
If they don't mind, then I think that would be fine for Liz to do that.
Okay.
Liz is going to be late tonight. She's getting boosted after work. And I mean, she's getting her booster shot.
Thank you, Dan.
Okay.
Hey, Dan.
Yes, Wendell.
I'm sorry, and Renee, before we pass that issue, I'm afraid our monthly meeting in February is too quick. I'm afraid
Okay.
the trip, yeah, I think we,
You know,
but
you're
I'd
right.
love, but I think doing it in March would be a ton of fun. And I will help coordinate with Liz, because we've been doing a bunch on photography.
Mhm.
And so, but and of course, luckily we do have Mark Stein on. We'll coordinate and get all the photographs from this coming up Big Bend trip and prior Big Bend trips. And we'll just do a Big Bend Apapalooza, I think is what
Okay.
Mark calls them. So let's do Big Bend in March and keep your regulars in Feb.
Okay, okay, that's
I
fine.
think that'll be a fun way to get the spring kicked off.
Okay,
All right, what happened to Liz?
Well, Liz is in my office. We'll work together.
All right, Renee, let's review what we now have.
for February, then we go back to what I originally said, Kathy Jack and Robert Trent from Public Land and Trust. Coming
Okay,
to talk about how they get parks started in neighborhoods and things of that nature. And
Okay.
I do know they both do a very good talk. Kathy Jack is the Nature Conservatory, and they will talk about trees and how to get trees planted, and just give, be a good idea if we could invite some neighborhood communities that have neighborhood watches, that kind of thing, because she lets you know how to get started and what they have available. They have resources available.
okay, so then March will be what?
March
Bend.
March will then be Big Bend, and I don't have April narrowed down yet, but I'll let you know.
Well, is Liz the same as Big Bend? No.
Yes.
Yes. So then March is Big Bend and Liz, is that right?
Yes.
Hey,
Okay.
Dan, this is David. I would suggest that we have a blockbuster for April to bring people back, if that's possible.
Oh, that'd be good.
A blockbuster?
Well, something that would be, exciting, like Dave Cortez, or someone really fascinating,
Well, I
Dave
doubt that
Cortez.
Dave will come. He's here tonight, I doubt he'll come back in April.
Well,
Okay,
what I'm saying is we
Right,
hopefully we
right.
can have an interesting program that will be a draw. That's all I'm saying.
Okay.
I have one
Well-
other possibility that I kind of had for April. I just hadn't narrowed it down. And it is a report about the CCAP, the committee. By then we will have
Ooh.
met a few times. And especially, April's Earth Day month anyway, I'd really like to squeeze that in too.
Well,
That would be
sounds-
great, Renee.
That sounds like a blockbuster, David.
Mhm.
It does, especially since we have representation on that committee, even among the co-chair of our new city environmental committee. It's heavily influenced by Sierra Club members and XCOM members. So that would be fabulous.
Okay, my first meeting is going to be Friday.
Your first meeting?
The first meeting with the committee is Friday. Well, for me will be Friday. I
Oh,
wasn't able
okay.
to attend the December meeting. It was a short notice and they had some technical problems anyway. So I'm choosing to go in person on Friday.
Okay. So then you will try to get a speaker for April?
Yes. Well, I'll tell you who it'll be. It's going to be Catherine probably.
Catherine Bazan?
Uh-huh.
Okay. All right, sounds good. Wendell, you want to say anything about volunteers and fundraising?
Very quickly, they're both actually kind of combined. And luckily we have LeBeau Buchanan on the call with us tonight, in that Oak Cliff Earth Day is April 3rd. And luckily it is outdoors. So we're hoping that it does not get canceled. And we are already taking steps to socially distance our booths and keep our people safe. Maybe even having some special masks for people that show up without masks. But the connection with fundraising is that because our regular fundraising has been curtailed with outings being on the sidelines for 2 years, we're hoping to really put the push onto fundraise for Sierra Club at Oak Cliff Earth Day. And we already have the biggest booth, and we want to continue Dallas Sierra Club to have the biggest booth at the entire place. For those of you who don't know, at least nothing I've heard different, I'm 99% sure that Earth X down at State Fair of Texas is not going to happen. They may do something else, but the big thing they do at the State Fair is not going to happen. And so Oak Cliff Earth Day / Dallas Sierra Club / Green Source, etc. We're going to be the big dog in town, and we want to take advantage of this. So so look for some fundraising letters asking you to donate even a little so that we can go first class at Oak Cliff Earth Day this year. So that's going to be a big deal, and I think it's going to be very exciting.
Okay, thanks, Wendell. David, do you want to say anything about our political situation?
Well, sure. As I reported, I believe last month, I think we had just voted on our state representative endorsements of those who have good records and who have been challenged in the primary. That's all the state rep announcements we're going to make before the primary. But Retta Bowers in District 113 has been challenged by someone in the Democratic primary. And so we have endorsed Retta. I called her. She was quite excited that we had done that and very happy. So if any of you live on the eastern side of Dallas County, on the Garland, Mesquite, not Saxe, but Sunnyvale, down the eastern side of the county, that Retta is likely your state representative. So we may have some additional local endorsements. We're working on right now that the political committee has recommended an endorsement of our county judge, but our XCOM needs to vote on that, and the state XCOM chapter XCOM needs to approve it. But within a week or so or less, we should have that finalized for our county judge. I think the Harris County folks are doing the same for some of their local county commission candidates. And so that's basically it. We don't have any city council races this year because it's the off year for city council. This is your year for state house and statewide races. We will be having endorsements of nominees after the primary at some point in late spring or summer. So you'll find out plenty ahead of time that what we're going to do. The good thing is there's going to be a lot of opportunities for you to participate in a lot of our campaign efforts to raise money for our PAC, to support our candidates. So stay tuned. It's a bit early, but we're already working on our endorsement process. So you'll hear more about that. And when we have our retreat, our XCOM retreat, I'll share some of these plans with the XCOM. Thanks.
All right, thanks, David. Liz is not here yet because she's getting a booster tonight. So instead, we have the chairman of the Outings Committee, Mark Stein, and he's going to say whatever Liz was going to say, plus hopefully some other things. Go ahead, Mark.
Okay, hello, group. Liz asked me to make a plea for leaders for ICO, which stands for Inspiring Connections Outdoors program. It's the Sierra Club's program to, by means of hiking and camping, make introduction to kids from elementary through high school ages to the outdoors and environmental stewardship. So if anybody is interested in becoming an ICO leader, the contact person is Liz Whelan, and that email address is LIZ for Liz, W for Whelan, ICO for Inspiring Connections Outdoors. That spells lizwico@aol.com. Beyond the need and desire for more leaders for Inspiring Connections Outdoors. I'm going to make a last call for leaders who would like to be outings leaders. We have a workshop set up at Eisenhower State Park on Saturday and Sunday, January the 22nd and 23rd. It should be a good time and convey a lot of great information on what you need to do, and here's what you need to know to be a Sierra Club outings leader. This is the last call, so send me an email, mark@steinplanning.com, or all this information about the outings leader training program is on the website. You can find my contact there. We're going to Big Bend in 4 weeks. All 25 places on the Big Bend trip sold out in mid-December. So good news. Hopefully it means we're going to do pretty well with other outings, day trips and backpacking trips in 2023. If we can just get COVID managed pretty well within the next month, we'll be in pretty good shape. That's it.
Okay, is that it, Mark?
That's it.
Okay, thank you, Mark. John, could you show the next slide at this point?
Oh, what next slide? You got me.
There's no next slide?
No.
Okay, then we are ready to introduce our speaker for tonight. And Renee, I'm going to have you introduce Dave Cortez.
Okay. Well, once again, welcome everybody to the general meeting of the Sierra Club for January. I'd like to introduce our speaker. It is Dave Cortez. He is director of the Lone Star chapter. There are a couple things that you also need to know about him, besides being a wonderful people person. He has been in his past, he's been senior organizer for Sierra. He's been the interim organizing manager for Sierra. He's been with Sierra as an employee 10 years. The last thing was clean energy for all. He was coordinator for that. He has had other various roles. He has a long resume, but anything that Dave would like to add to that, I will let him do that, because I know everybody's anxious to hear about the grid. February is fast approaching and we want to be warm this year. So without further ado, I'm going to let Mr. Cortez take over.
Thank you, Ms. Renee. I appreciate that welcome, and Dan and the crew. Real quick, just a process check about how much time do we have for a presentation?
How much do you need, Dave?
Well, I'll try and keep it to 20 minutes, but I'd like to ask some questions of you all throughout. So I think it could go a little longer than that.
Well,
but y'all,
that's well
don't be
within
afraid to interrupt me.
Our time. You know that you've got plenty of time.
All right. Well, thanks, y'all. So a couple of other things I'll say just about myself. Yeah, I'm a first and foremost, I'm a papa. I've got a 3.5-year-old, almost 4-year-old. I don't know if you can see her pictures or not in there. 4-year-old daughter. She just started pre-K last week. It's a heck of a time to be navigating that. And my partner, who I live here with in South Austin, just came off sabbatical to teach in person at St. Edward's University, which is also a rough go of things. Just to have 2 members of the family who for 2 years have been basically locked down, re-entering society. So it's been stressful, and they're on my mind a lot tonight. You might hear them in the background because it's bedtime and bath time and all that fun stuff. But you know, all I've known for the most part of my life is Texas. Born and raised in El Paso. Spent 18 years there. Came to school here in Austin. Went to St. Edward's for political science and environmental policy. Wanted to get involved in, that was John Kerry versus George Bush time. I wanted to get involved in something, but there really just wasn't much to plug into unless you were at UT. And, that always stuck with me. I studied the social movements of the 1960s, had a lot of flavor and taste and desire for the romance of that time, uprising, change, all the energy that led to Richard Nixon of all people to sign the Environmental Protection Act, National Environmental Protection Act, Clean Water Act. There was people demanding change, and it was a transformational time. And it's really a part of my foundational politic when I do this work. I was never expecting to do this work, to be completely honest. I wanted to be a park ranger out in El Paso after school. I was trying to get a job at Waco Tanks, if any of y'all have been out there, just east of the city. And, I had a just frontline making pizzas and sandwiches, minimum wage job, had a day off, was at a coffee shop, and a guy approached me with a clipboard, asked me if I'd sign a letter to oppose the reopening of what's called the Asarco copper smelter. So let me see if I can show you that. I don't have my picture up. 828-foot smokestack that was 110 years old in the middle of El Paso, my hometown. You couldn't live any part of that city or in Juarez, Mexico, without being contaminated. But growing up in that community, you didn't think anything of it. It was a place for jobs. It was a place that my uncles worked at, my cousins worked at. I went to school 2 miles from, and I lived a relatively, modest middle class upbringing as a kid. But still, whether you were poor, middle class, wealthy, you were inundated by that smelter. So I was shocked to find out it was going to reopen. I signed the letter, got a call. They asked if I could volunteer to promote a meeting. I did. It was with a group called Acorn that some of you might know, El Paso Acorn. They ended up hiring me to do community organizing. And so I really started to get my training in community organizing by working in the different barrios of El Paso near this copper smelter. This copper smelter contaminated entire communities. There were dozens of kids with MS, mothers and parents who were worried about their sick kids, former plant workers who had heavy metal contamination, who'd been exposed to chemical weapons, waste materials, all kinds of horrific stories. Yet the wealthiest man in the world at the time, Carlos Slim, a billionaire from Mexico, wanted to reopen the facility. So we mobilized to fight it. And that's where I learned what the TCEQ is. That's where I learned about Rick Perry. That's where I learned about George Bush's legacy as governor, those two as governors. And then a little known guy who used to be attorney general named Greg Abbott. Started to understand how of just minuscule importance El Paso was to the rest of the state. Fast forward, we did a lot of political work there, everything, but fast forward to 2011, I've been working in the driver's license office. I couldn't get a job. If you all remember 2009, the recession, I was like everyone else, just couldn't find work. And so I took a job at the driver's license office. I was the guy who'd come in, take your picture, give you your ticket. You'd probably scream at me if you'd been waiting in line for too long. I was that guy taking all that heat. But I needed insurance. And that was the only way I could find it, $24,000 a year to get insurance. And I was lucky that after every environmental organization in the state passed on me, Ken Kramer, former chapter director, Cyrus Reed, and our conservation director today, and the now director of the Texas AFL-CIO, Rick Levy, took a chance on me to do a labor environmental organizing project. And I just give you all this context because, every step of the way, I spent my time outside, spent my time running, hiking, fishing, cycling with my dad. My first volunteer time was in college with the Sierra Club, the Austin Sierra Club, getting out to the North Padre shores to do beach cleanup to protect the nesting habitat for the Kemp's Ridley sea turtle. I live outdoors. It's just, I need it. I miss my mountains in West Texas. And so just the opportunity to work, to do all kinds of fun stuff, build relationships and coalitions between union workers and environmentalists. I couldn't say no to that. It sounded fantastic. And that's how I got my foot in this door and started to meet a lot of y'all. That's back when I met David, Wendell not long after. the Gouldies not long after, and a lot of other folks who've been volunteering throughout the state for quite a long time. And I just want to express my gratitude for all the hours that you all put into your work, for hanging out today, for all the energy you put into it, organizing these trips. I have nothing but respect and gratitude for what you do. I come from the grassroots. I've always worked with volunteers my entire career, and I'm just really excited to get the chance to work with you all in this capacity now as the director of the chapter. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen from my laptop here, so bear with me just 1 second, see if I can make this happen. All right. Is that, no, it's not working. Well, bear with me. I had to buy a new computer over the weekend because it stopped working. I apologize, John and Dan, everyone. Let me get this going here. Okay. There
Has
we go.
John allowed you to share screen?
Yeah, it's about to fire up right now.
Okay, here we go.
All righty. Let me get the presentation up. Okay. Well, I think we all remember very well what our experience was last February. Forgive me if you can't see my picture right now. Just a little technical glitch with that. I'll talk a little bit today about what's actually happening with the grid reform process, but I really want to emphasize why it's happening, the way it's happening, which means you're not involved, who's influencing it, and what we're trying to do about it, and how we can leverage this issue to really support the people who've been harmed the most by the crisis. We already went over a little bit about me, but there's my handle at the bottom left. If you are on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, you name it, Austin Baichuco, that's me. Give me a follow and I'll follow you back. I want to skip over a few things here to get through it. A helpful tool that I will share a link with the leadership team here so you all can get it and review it after the meeting. We just announced and launched our legislative scorecard last week. I guess it was only Monday, but we did a sneak preview last week. And in there, you're going to find a lot of helpful information about how your legislator your state rep and your state senator took positions on the pandemic, public health, the grid, the winter storm, etc. It's a wonderful resource that Matt Johnson, our political director, Cyrus Reed, our conservation director, and several volunteers helped put together. So please stay tuned for that and check it out. See how your state rep did. And the Dallas folks were pretty good for the most part. I think as you get up into further North Texas, Denton County, things like that, not so much. But we want to make sure that we're holding our legislators accountable. Most specifically, because while we try to work with people to get them to really advocate for fixing the grid, for doing it in a way that centers people who were harmed the most, they wanted to pivot to all the things you've heard about: attacks on voting rights, attacks on LGBTQ Texans, folks of color, talking about systemic racism and CRT, and further restricting abortion, anything but actually helping solve the problem that burdened so many of us in February. So I want to take a moment to think back to that. If you all can with me, it's almost a year. It's been almost a year since Valentine's Day. My first thought when I think back to the failure that we went through was when Fort Worth had this tremendous icing event. I'm sure many of you all remember it. A horrific pileup on the highway. I was watching that on Twitter, watching it unfold on the news. Just truck after truck and car after car was losing control, and just terrible accidents on the highway early morning that Friday or Thursday. And we had ice, snow, cold, more ice, let's just take a minute, and I actually welcome. I'm gonna stop the share for just a moment and see if anybody wants to. If anybody wants to come offline and just share a few words about what your experience was like when you were struggling on February 15th, February 14th. I'll just model it briefly. I remember waking up in the middle of the night around I think it was 1:58 in the morning. My daughter's screaming. The temperature has dropped in the house. Her noise machine's off, and we're scrambling, trying to figure out what's going on, checking the phone. My partner goes to sleep thinking maybe the power will come back on. It didn't 4 hours later, and it didn't 60 hours later. I've never felt a panic like that in my life, and I could say more, but if anybody here went through anything in the storm that you want to share with your community here, I'd love to just take a few seconds for you to share that. Feel free to come off mute.
Dave, Renee, for most people that I know, myself included, it was just the isolation and the helplessness, because like in my neighborhood, it was all the stores that they're walking distance, like to my apartment. You know, I remember thinking, I was so cold, I remember thinking I'll go walk over to 7-Eleven, get a cup of coffee. I get over to 7-Eleven and it's chained up and the lights are out. They shut the buses down. So I had friends that said, why didn't you go stay with your mom? Because a lot of people south actually had power. And she said, why didn't you go stay with your mom? They shut the buses down and they shut the train down. So I had no way to get anywhere. And that, for me, it was just the hopelessness and the isolation. And you didn't know when it was going to end. Like you said, you know, you're sitting there thinking, oh, it'll come on in an hour. And then 3 or 4 hours later, it's still not on. And then the next day, it's still not on. And for most people I talked to, it was the hopelessness and the helplessness they complained of.
Thank you. Thank you. If that resonates with anyone, please drop your thoughts in the chat. Anyone else want to share
This is
your
LeBeau.
experience? Go ahead.
Yeah, this LeBeau. Yeah, my electricity went off, and it was off, I think 3 hours one time, 6 hours a second time, 8 hours. And then it started getting a little bit less until it finally came back on. But my issue was, you know, because I was under like five layers of blankets with 2 dogs. So I was staying warm, even though the temperature in the house was in the 30s. But I did lose about 2 to 4 fish, I can't remember, in my fish tank, and everything in my greenhouse died. So it was not fun. So, and luckily the only broken pipe I had was outdoors, and it didn't bust until it started warming up. So.
I'm sorry to hear that. Thank you for sharing, LeBeau. I see Jim Kornberg wanted to add.
Yes, we live out on a lake in East Texas, and we were watching television when everything went off about 8 o'clock or 8:15 that night, and we just went to bed. But we were lucky. We did have a fireplace at our house that we had going, but we lost all the electricity that night, and during the night the pipes froze up underneath, and one of them broke. When we finally got, 2 days later, when we finally got water being able to move forward, we couldn't turn it on because it was spraying all of underneath the house. So I would go down to the lake and bring up 5-gallon buckets of water so we could pour them into the toilet so we could actually flush the toilet. But and it was pretty bad. We're down in kind of a low spot next to the lake, and to get out to the highway, you have to go up a very large hill. And we finally on Friday went out at the end of the week, myself and one of the neighbors, to go down to town and try to get some food and things like that. We were fortunate that we had our we managed to get water from one of our neighbors, and the rest is I was dipping the water out of the lake. So that anyway, but we did get on rolling electricity after a while. So we'd have it for 30 minutes, and then we would not have it for 30 minutes, and then finally that it got up to an hour, but it took 9 days before I got the water turned back on.
That sounds right. Sorry to hear that. Thank you for sharing, Jim. I'll take one more. Anyone else want to share a little bit about your story in the storm? Go ahead,
Dave,
Susan.
I was just going to say, with all the problems, I had electricity for the first day and a half, 2 days, and then it was off for about 24 hours. I was grateful to be a backpacker because I had my little stove, I had the propane, and the sleeping bag and my winter clothes from snowshoeing and all that kind of thing. But also the upside was I'm in an apartment building and people were checking on neighbors. And kind of all I could think of is, in the olden days when you used to know your neighbors. And there were some neighbors that we were knocking on doors of people that we'd maybe not met before, but we were going around and just seeing if everybody was okay and pulling blankets from certain apartments to loan to other apartments and that kind of thing. So I didn't have it rough because of the supplies I had, but so I was grateful for that. And I can eat, whatever, whenever. So, but I know a lot of people that didn't have that luxury, and it was such a hardship. And again, just not knowing when it was going to go back on. You didn't know how much fuel you could use or should use because you didn't know how long you needed it to last. So
that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a lot. Thank you, Liz, for that, sharing that experience. Susan, close us out. Susan Cooper.
Yes, I was fortunate, actually. I woke up in the middle of the night, cold, and it was 30 degrees in the house. And, 80 years old, I'm living by myself at home, and I was afraid of hypothermia. So I put my coat on and sweaters and layers of clothing and just kept moving around the house, and called my children the next morning. And they said, Mom, you got to go to a hotel and we'll pay for it. I was very fortunate. So I went to the DoubleTree in Richardson. I made reservations and I said, I need a room with a small refrigerator and a microwave. And I took all the TV dinners and all the frozen foods I had in the house, anything. And I took it to the hotel with me with clothing and, stuff to do. And I was okay. I was safe and warm. But the restaurants weren't functioning in the hotel. They stopped functioning at the beginning of COVID. So I lived on chicken egg rolls for several days. And I kept looking out the window because it was a very treacherous ride from my house, on icy streets, and I'm not accustomed to driving on ice. And I got to the hotel and I was afraid to get out of the car because I walk with a walking stick. So I called into the hotel and I told them I'm parked right in front of the door, but I'm afraid to come out because the walkway is icy. So they sent somebody out to help me. I was safe and warm, a little bit bored with all the egg rolls, but and every day I looked out the window to see if the ice had melted on the parking lot. And when it looked safe, I drove home. And fortunately, I had electricity. I could tell because the garage door functioned, and I was home safe. So I was among the fortunate ones. But I know that a lot of people had to drive out of state to find a place to live like I did.
That's right.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing, Susan.
Thank you.
And you all, I know there's more to share. I just wanted to hold some space because it's really easy to move on and forget what we've all been through. And there are people that are very eager for you to move on and forget what we went through. Let me get this slideshow back up here. We have been making an intentional effort at the chapter and with our National Sierra Club campaigns to gather stories And I want to follow up with you all about this. There's a lot of perspective to be shared, not just what you went through, not just the folks who lost their lives or lost their homes, but even things like, our chapter chair, Andy Belinsky, was sharing with me. They were doing their Christmas bird count in Central Texas, and the numbers are way down. There's anecdotal stories of mass die-offs of various species of birds in the region. Birds being found clustered up in bird boxes, all frozen to death after the storm. A tremendous impact on trees in our natural habitats and ecosystems. This storm hit everything, every part of our society, and it brought us to our knees, and it almost brought us to near collapse, as you know. But as with anything like this that happens, there are people responsible. And so I want to emphasize a little bit here. We cannot lose sight that there has been one administration in power for 21 years in this state. Around 2000, we had the deregulation of the electric market. And that's what facilitated a lot of clean energy growth. Many environmentalists, many consumer advocates supported that 21 years ago, and helped create the system that we have today. What we failed to do is actually regulate the industries that provide a lot of the fuel for our power generation. So that gentleman right there in the middle with the big happy grin, Todd Staples, the family on the right, the Craddock family. Those are important people to know, not just Dan Patrick and Greg Abbott, but they are heavily invested in the oil and gas industry. They regulate the oil and gas industry. Tom Craddock is the longest serving legislator in the history of the state of Texas, and his daughter, Christy, is not the chairperson anymore of the Railroad Commission, but has been before, and is still a very strong defender of the oil and gas industry, largely empowered by Mr. Staples. And I'll get into more of this when we talk about what the legislature did and didn't do, excuse me, in just a moment. But here's just a quick snapshot, and I'll make this presentation available to you all to share and look for reference. This is the best we could do to illustrate this really wonky regulatory structure we have. The legislature oversees through legislation, the Public Utility Commission, the Railroad Commission. The PUC is the one that regulates your electric provider, TXU, people you pay your bills to, the poles and wires, so Encore, the transmission distribution companies. They regulate ERCOT. You remember when the storm happened, it was like, Green New Deal and ERCOT. That's what caused this whole mess. They were ready to go to blame anybody but themselves. PUC also regulates the power plants, but separately, the Railroad Commission, which doesn't regulate anything related to railroads, regulates fossil fuels, oil and gas and coal and mining. They oversee the supply, oil and gas wells, pipelines, drilling. And that is where we saw the crux of the failure in the blackout. And I'll get into that more in a minute, but don't lose sight of what you see on the top left of your screen. The governor appoints the Public Utility Commission commissioners. He appoints ERCOT board members, and the Railroad Commission is elected. Every person in power and leadership in those positions is a major campaign contributor to no one other than Governor Greg Abbott and Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick. Cannot forget that. Some of the other players that are taking shape in the discussion, just want to name them so you can see it. These are all new commissioners at the PUC. I'm missing one, apologize. It's a little dated. But again, these are friends of the governor. Doesn't mean they're bad people. Means they are installed people. They're there to really move an agenda that is approved and dictated by Governor Abbott. Let's go on to ERCOT. My hometown represented here, Paul Foster. Paul Foster is one of the wealthiest men in the state, former CEO of Western Refining, which was bought by Marathon Oil, operates huge refineries in El Paso and a lot of other oil and gas networks in the state. He was also chairman of the UT Board of Regents. Brad Jones, another industry insider, worked for the Gulf Coast Power Association, served on their board for many years. These are folks who have been put in place to represent industry, to make sure that industry's interests are front and center. What you will not find in any of this is much representation of folks like you and me, or your local governments or anything like that. So briefly, we'll go through just a few slides talking about what actually went down leading up to the blackout. And then I'll pause and jump to what we can do about it. I don't want to go too lectury on you all today. But you can take a look here. Like I said, the gas system. Ahead of all of the power outages at the power plants, what we saw was the wellheads freezing. We saw the distribution lines freezing. Equipment was going offline left and right. Now, after the freeze, in front of the state legislature, Christy Craddock, who was at the time leading the Railroad Commission, just said, plain and simple, they went offline because they didn't have electricity. Well, the reason they didn't have electricity is because the gas plants, which our state depends on heavily, did not have fuel. Plain and simple. There was no gas going to a bunch of gas plants. These are also old gas plants that were not winterized, so they were failing left and right. And also a lot of coal plants were, the coal was freezing, their operations weren't winterized, everything was going down. Yes, wind production was low, but it was not the cause of what happened. And you can see that illustrated on this slide. By far, fracked gas, drilled gas, whatever you want to call it, was where we had the dearth of supply problems. We also had as you all have said, it was terribly cold, and we had a huge spike in demand. We don't need to go too deep here. Just the main point is that there were a ton of people trying to fire up their heaters, use their space heaters, their furnaces. Demand hit a record that evening, that night, and our system was not prepared to sustain it. And well, is that just, businesses and, big operations? No, look at this. It was residential. It was people in their homes, just like you and me. You take a snapshot here. This is what Cyrus put together, the difference in residential load, that this wasn't even when the storm was hitting, but this is when it was 15 degrees in Dallas. Half of the demand was residential. It was even greater when the storm hit, putting a tremendous strain on the system. So let me go ahead and jump a few slides here, but I want to pause and open it up if there's any questions before I jump to what we can do about this, how you can advocate, how you can help fix the grid. Any questions right now?
Dave, are there reports that are compiled at this point to let us know at what the status is right now?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, there's let me see if I have this slide. We'll go through a little bit, but right now the Public Utility Commission has had a process of redesigning the electric market. So that thing I talked about 21 years ago, when we deregulated the market, they had months of public meetings, several of them around the state, hundreds of people coming to public meetings talking about electricity, their bills, energy choices, et cetera. And it took a long time, and it was a thorough process. Now the Public Utility Commission, directed by the governor, they began this process in late September, and they published at the end of December their blueprint for redesigning the electric market. It happened at lightning speed. So there is a heavy technical report. The problem is that it's incredibly difficult to understand. There's a lot of energy reporters. There's a gentleman named Doug Lewin. You can follow on Twitter at Doug Lewin, Lewin, who tries to de-wonkify some of this take these reports and put them in working people's language. The long story short, and I'll spare the slides on these things. What we're seeing is that the PUC, at the behest of the governor, is working to increase capacity. What that means is they want to build more power plants. Instead of trying to reduce demand, so I showed you that slide of 75,000 megawatts of demand on the system. Instead of trying to bring that down, they just want to expand supply, right? But remember, supply was a big problem in causing this. Now, we've seen the legislature mandate that the electrical system winterize, which many of them have. We've seen lots of power plants winterize their operations, which is a good thing. What we haven't seen is the other side on the supply. We didn't see the legislature mandate that the Railroad Commission require gas suppliers to winterize the wellheads, pipelines, all that stuff that froze up leading up to this. And why did that happen? Well, because of influence, because of power, because of some of those people that I mentioned early on. You might have seen in the news that the Railroad Commission was simply allowing companies to opt out of winterizing for filling out a form and filing a $150 fee. Now that has changed a little bit. There's a little bit less slippery slope, but we're not seeing companies winterize the way that we'd like them to. And we will be publishing a report, a technical report that is made for you all to read and for groups to share with their members around the anniversary, around February 12th. Around that day, we'll be sharing something with Sierra Club chapters all in the Midwest that also suffered from the storm.
Ryan Baggett has had his hand up for a bit. Ryan?
Oh, hey, thanks. Yeah, I'm used to doing that, and thanks, Dan. So one report was that it was the windmills that were largely responsible. I don't buy that at all, but what was the what was their reasoning for saying it didn't have anything to do with what you were just talking about, but had to do more with windmills and other renewables?
Yeah, if you follow the reporting on this, and it can be a real slippery slope and a rabbit hole. I don't mean to be cynical, but they had a plan. There were people who were ready to issue a talking point for when this type of stuff happens. It was pure politics. Now, I showed you a chart a while ago that showed reduction in supply and how much natural gas was offline during the storm. Wind was not blowing, and some of the blades and the turbines froze up, but it was not nearly the amount to cause the problems that we had. But it was an easy scapegoat. Secondly, ERCOT, what's that? Let's blame this thing that nobody knows. And their leadership don't even live in the state of Texas. Oh, that's going to piss people off. Let's blame them too. And it just, at a time when people didn't have water, were sifting dog poop out of their snow so they could flush the toilets or melt that snow to cook or whatever, or waiting in food lines. It was a smart move for them, and it took weeks and months to unpack it, and they won the messaging battle on that.
It's just that I know for a fact that the windmills that are designed by GE have large onboard batteries in the gearbox, and also have a sprayer mechanism that sprays the blades with antifreeze so they don't ice up. That was a big concern when these things were originally conceived, that you'd have massive icicles, forming on them when they weren't moving, and then they could harm people. If a 30-foot icicle fell on you, it's like, okay. And this was, when these were being conceived back in the 1990s when I was going through college, and I was like, okay. But yeah, the onboard batteries that provide power to heaters inside the gearbox, the blades won't freeze. They won't freeze. You're talking, you'd have to have like Antarctica type extended cold weather for a windmill to fail. What
Yeah.
you can do is remotely shut them down and say, oh yeah, look, it froze.
Sure.
Froze. That's such a lie. One more question I'd like to ask is, what about Ted Cruz? Are you going to talk about that guy?
I think we all know.
It's like,
where he
I'm
went.
going to Cancun down here, with his family.
Yeah. It's I mean, I hope you all can take a moment and remember how incredibly infuriating that was to see, a coward tuck and run the way that we all know cowards do. We were trapped. We couldn't get out. We just couldn't get out of our neighborhood. We're surrounded by hills. We don't have 4-wheel drive. But meanwhile, we had neighbors, elderly folks who were running the stove in their homes, the gas stove, just to keep warm. We're like, hey, wait a minute, you got to crack the door open a little bit if you're going to be doing that. People just didn't know. Meanwhile, this guy's running. It was so upsetting. This is why we're talking about this, not just about him, but we have to turn our experience, your stories, the stories of your neighbors, like Liz was talking about, the folks who struggled and you helped out, Liz. We need to gather those stories and remind people that there are people responsible for this. This isn't just a catastrophe of natural causes. This is a failure of a regulatory failure of our legislative system and our administrative system. We've had freezes before. We've known that the natural gas system was vulnerable, and guess what? We just didn't even have much of a freeze recently. It was a freeze, but nothing like last year, and it showed again that the natural gas system was the supply dropped dramatically just last week when the temperatures dropped below freezing. There was lots of reporting on this, and you can find it at Texas Sierra Club on Twitter and on our blog on the Texas Sierra Club blog page. Natural gas supply dropped again because it's not been winterized. Again, we've been through this 4 times, and they've failed to do what they need to do to protect the system. These are the same companies. I'm going to go back to the share for a moment just to get you a little bit on what we can do about this. These are the same companies that profited millions of dollars off of the collapse. I know you all who hang out or live in Dallas or recreate and get out and about are familiar with the name Kelsey Warren. I know he can be a villain in a lot of energy work, but his company also made $1 billion off of this crisis. Energy Transfer Partners was able to declare what's called force majeure, which means due to extenuating circumstances, they cannot provide the supply of gas or the fuel that they've committed to in their contracts. And in their contracts to provide gas to utilities, gas utilities, power plants, they have that clause of force majeure, and they declared it. What they did was they held on to supply and allowed the price of gas to spike. Now we've seen cities like San Antonio, the city of Corpus Christi, where the utilities are public, the gas utilities got saddled with just huge gas bills that are now being passed on to consumers that we're all going to be paying back for years to come. It's infuriating what happened, but why are they allowed to get away with this? Well, this was just tweeted today by Justin Miller from the Texas Observer. If you all remember in the news, Governor Abbott was assuring us just a couple weeks ago that the power wouldn't go out. Well, who are these companies that he met with? It's hard to see there, so let's go ahead and make it a little clear for you. NRG Energy, the largest power plant operator in the country. Calpine, largest gas plant operator in Texas. Energy Transfer Partners by Kelsey Warren. Atmos Energy, gas provider to many of y'all's homes. You probably pay bills to them. Centerpoint and Encore, the transmission and distribution corporations, which are also major donors to the legislators who attack voting rights, the legislators who failed to regulate the gas industry, the legislators who failed to support weatherizing our homes, Vistra, which used to be Luminant. I think you catch my drift. what I'm getting at here. These folks have tremendous influence, and the governor has continued to meet with all of them repeatedly to get assurances that the grid won't fail. Yet we just went through what we went through with the freeze. So acknowledging who holds this power is a critical piece of what we're trying to combat here. And to come back to show you a little bit, and Dan or anyone else, let me know if the time's getting bad. Show you a couple of things that you can do to counteract that power of the fossil fuel industry. We've been engaging folks to mobilize to the PUC. We still are asking people to contact your state legislator, to contact the public utility commissioners, and let them know about your story and what you went through. The Public Utility Commission never sees the public. They never hear from the public. But in mid-December, 9 days before Christmas, the Sierra Club with the Texas Campaign for the Environment and many other organizations, we got about 50 people to show up at the Public Utility Commission meeting where they were announcing the blueprint plan that I talked about. And they'd never had people show up and testify before. We had story after story, just like you all, people saying what they went through and that they wanted to see investments in energy efficiency and any kind of program to reduce the demand that we looked at earlier. And it got on all the news. It shook the commissioners. They were grateful. We were respectful. They were grateful for the testimony. Legislators were thankful that we were there. There's more of that we're going to continue to do. So you can find more at se.org/fixthegrid. Save that link. February 14th, we'll be recognizing the 1-year anniversary of this winter storm. And, we might be asking y'all, are you interested in holding vigil or doing a rally outside your state legislator's office? Check the scorecard. You can get it there, sc.org/TX Scorecard 2021, and take a look at your legislator and see how they did. Send them a thank you note if they were strong on the Winter Storm Uri response. Feel free to spank them on Twitter if they weren't. We're going to continue to engage in what's called the sunset review process of how the PUC, how ERCOT, and the office, the OPUC works, what their mandates are. Sunset process is a whole wonky thing, so I don't want to get into that too much. But we're going to keep organizing this year. And, I'll send you this presentation. You'll have this QR code that you can post on your social media or print out, and people can sign the petition by just holding their camera up to that. But what we're advocating for fundamentally is that we need to address the demand issue. No matter what the governor and the legislature has said they've done to fix the grid, they have not done anything to address demand. They have not done anything to make us safer in our homes. When we talk about energy efficiency and weatherization, we're talking about insulation. We're talking about funding to make our homes more efficient, to make our water systems more efficient, to make our utilities more efficient, you name it, our businesses, our multifamily housing complexes, to make rebates available for upgraded heaters and HVAC systems, better windows. Many of the people that perished in the storm died from either hypothermia or carbon monoxide poisoning. There's a lot that can be done to keep people, to tighten the envelope in a home, to make it more resistant to leaking in lower temperatures, but it's expensive and we need the state to invest in it. We know that clean energy is reliable. Local clean energy especially has the potential to really help a community continually provide power in a storm. But we need to make sure that that's expanded and it gets to more people, like in multifamily housing, for example. There's still a lot of work to get more transmission online to make sure that more communities can benefit from utility scale clean energy, and that we're addressing the ERCOT market at large. So there's a lot of wonky stuff here. Cyrus Reed is putting together a blog for us to help us understand, what do we mean by demand response? What do we mean by ancillary services? How can we use these wonky policy fixes to make sure that we're not penalizing clean energy, which is what's happening, and not propping up gas plants, coal plants, in really old fossil fuels to add capacity to the market. And again, we want to make sure that people, that you have a chance to speak in these processes. It's not easy to make it happen. The Public Utility Commission never held a public meeting specifically about their grid fix work. It was only invited testimony, and we went to the one public meeting they had about other issues and talked about all this in front of them. I'm going to skip over some of these on energy efficiency, and then we'll get some more questions. But something for you to take a screen grab of or take a picture when we're talking about fighting people who have tremendous influence and access. We need to think about not just meeting them, fighting, fire with little water hoses. The people who are in power, Kelsey Warren, those fossil fuel companies, Greg Abbott, have accumulated that power over a long, long time. You all know this. And they do it by maintaining their political power. And so this is a tool we use to help people think bigger than just petitioning, think bigger than just voting. We need to make sure that we're working and expanding the base of people that is engaging on these issues. So while the inverse of that would be what we see is the people in power reducing the number of people who can engage in the political process, but limiting access to the ballot box. That would be that structural power changing the playing field. We want to bring more people into this process. We want to make sure that the PUC and ERCOT see people they've never seen before, hear from people they've never heard before. And then we get people an opportunity to bring their neighbors and other community members into the process, and then get to that deep level right there of ethical and epistemic power, where we can talk about what Liz was talking about. Hey, we can help each other. Maybe we need to look after each other better. Maybe there's ways we can advocate together on more issues like green space, like expanding recycling, whatever it is that we're trying to do in our community. Our goal at the chapter is to make sure that we're doing everything we can to bring more people into the fold with whatever advocacy that we're doing. Last couple of bits here. The way that we want to make ourselves available at the chapter to support you in doing this work is centering clean energy, local, equitable clean energy solutions in our advocacy. So I heard you talk about CCAP earlier, whether you're talking about engaging TXU or whatever utility it is. Let's move towards what's going to help people directly. And that's always going to be helping them on their bills, helping them be safe in their homes, and helping them have access to good quality of life, whether that's green space, jobs, transit, you name it. We've been doing organizing in different communities around the state that really emphasizes this, that we need to talk about issues that are going to affect people in their own neighborhood. So, this is an example of something we can help you produce, and we can follow up offline. This is something we did in East Austin and in San Antonio, just a pamphlet to help people see how they can lower their trash bin size and save sometimes $15, $20 a month right on the spot by learning that they can get an extra recycle bin. Or here's the number to call to get some rebate information about upgrading your heater or your windows, etc. A lot of folks don't have this information, and we have a tremendous network of volunteers that can help get this information out. We can also work with those same communities to make sure that equity is at the center of the solutions that are being advocated for. So we're happy to meet again offline to talk about how to center equity in the CCAP process, or give you some advice on what's happened in San Antonio and in Austin's processes. But also, how do we make sure that local solar, community solar, is actually reaching people who can normally not afford to put solar panels on the roof, or don't have a roof that can actually hold a solar panel. Maybe they don't have the income. There's a whole lot of policy fixes we can do, and all of this will bring people into the fold. This will get people more involved, give them a chance to learn more about the Sierra Club, and participate with everything that you all are trying to do. So I know it was a crash course there, and I had to skip over quite a bit, but I'll leave it there and open it for let's take some questions from some folks who haven't had a chance to speak yet.
Well, what about Bob or Marianne? They've had their hands up.
Yeah, I can go. If that's okay.
Please.
Okay, so my question was for a bit earlier, I guess. Do you think the fact that ERCOT is an isolated grid and there's no interstate transmission also contributed to the crisis of last year?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that was Marianne that said that, right?
Yeah.
Thank you, Marianne. Absolutely. I mean, there's a lot of benefit in some folks' opinion to being an isolated island, but there's a strong movement of energy advocates, of energy industry advocates, of activists, of folks to say we need to open up the interconnects. That could potentially grow clean energy even more in Texas by allowing us to sell it to other states. Right now, it's limited to very small parts of the state where that fall outside of ERCOT. But one important thing to note, the states to the north of us in the other grids also had tremendous trouble providing power to their communities in the polar vortex. We're in a climate crisis, and we need to be clear that while that may be a fix that a lot of industries are going to fight, we need to do as much as we can to reduce demand and reduce our amounts of climate disrupting pollution that we're pumping into the atmosphere.
Hi, it's Bob. Can you hear me?
Hey, Bob. Yes, sir.
Yeah, just for what it's worth, I hear too many people talking about this from a political standpoint and a short-term focus and blaming names of people that are in the focus today. I arrived in the United States in January of 1980. We went into a headlong freeze, which astounded a lot of people. And the big thing in the news was that the electrical grid in Texas is on the verge of collapse. And that's when we had 10.5 million people in the state. Here we are 40 years later, we've got 32 million people in the state. And what are we talking about? The electrical grid is on the verge of collapse. Nothing's been done about it, whichever side of the fence the political system has been in Texas over 40 years. I might add, we went from the 1980 freeze to the 1980 heat wave, where temperatures were way ahead of anything we've seen in this global warming so-called crisis. So it's a problem with the political system over 40 years that I have been in this country, and nothing has been done about the electrical grid. The reason a lot of the companies that you mentioned are making a stack of money out of this crisis is they have the lobbying power, and the politicians are perfectly willing to take the money. The reason you don't see the politicians out publicly is they're too busy doing backroom deals and taking money for lobbying. This is not a lefty problem. It's not a righty problem. It's a political meltdown worse than the electrical system. That's my opinion for what it's worth.
Hey, I think that's worth a whole bag of nickels. I agree with you. Yeah, we talk about the one administration being in power for 21 years, but you're absolutely right. Oil and gas has been in power for quite a long time in this state. That's fine. There's a lot of folks that work in the oil and gas industry. A lot of good people just making way for their families. But the fact is, it's exactly what you said. And you'll see that in our scorecard. If you read into it and look at how we scored some legislators, there's a lot of folks that, okay, they might say something nice about the grid or something bad about Abbott. But when push came to shove, they didn't show up for what we just talked about. They didn't push hard. It's because they can't. That's how much power these, the Texas Oil and Gas Association, the Association of Electric Providers, you name it, all of these lobbying firms, just they run the show. And that's why our gas system had such a hit just a few days ago when it froze again. Let's not forget that. We like to say we are bipartisan in our critique of the electrical system.
Hey, Dave.
Yes, sir.
Two things. One is thank you so much for accepting the job of director. You obviously follow Ken Kramer, who went through hundreds of these types of battles, and we're all very glad and lucky to have you. Not that any of your last few predecessors were not you, but we're glad you're here, and we want the Dallas group. You know, you to always know the Dallas group is very appreciative. My question to you is, how did solar fare during the Snowmageddon?
Yeah, thank you for all that, Wendell. I really appreciate all that. And so far, everyone's questions, thank you. I don't have the data on that offhand. I'll check in with Cyrus. Cyrus Reed, y'all, you've heard me mention his name. He's our energy policy wonk. Lead. He's at ERCOT meetings. He's in the PUC, and he knows the wonky side of this. If you remember, we had cloudy weather for several days, and it wasn't producing much, but it wasn't not producing. It was fine. It was stable. Recently, when we had this gas problem, with our most recent freeze, solar was overproducing through the roof. There's a lot to discuss about local solar and what kind of policies can we make. It's tough where y'all are because you're in the deregulated market. Everyone has the power to choose their provider. But just because you have solar on your roof doesn't mean that you would have been fine in the blackout. We have to propose new suites of policies to make sure that it's easier for you to get battery storage, or easier for you to have a system in place to where you can, if you're disconnected, those panels will provide you electricity. That's all doable. It's very doable stuff. The problem is, as Bob was mentioning, a lot of the big utilities, they don't want that because their whole system is built on that demand staying very high. The price of electricity goes very high when the demand is very high, and people can make a ton of money off of it, including solar. But that's part of what they're trying to change with this market redesign process. But I'll follow up with you, everyone, to get a more specific statistic.
Thank you, sir.
Are there any other questions for Dave?
Yes. So just wanted to volunteer to the group. If you're not familiar with the Interstate Renewable Energy Commission, IRECUSA.org, and I'll plump that into the chat right now.
Who's speaking?
Ryan Baggett. Hey, Dan.
Oh, hi.
Okay.
Thanks, Ryan.
So they have the IREX 2021 highlights and impacts, all sorts of information on there, including position papers about specifically the February 2021 freeze and how solar fared. Dave, I did want to ask you about market-based solutions to the impact of microgrids. It doesn't take a genius, and I'm just a lowly math major, right? To understand that if you put, say, solar carports up over commercial parking lots, okay, we could stack a lot of benefits. Number one, park in the shade. No one's going to say no to parking in the shade.
Sounds great.
In July in Texas, when the march up from the North 40 to the Walmart, you melt your legs halfway up to your thigh. It's stupid. You don't get rained on when it rains. And then you put these little solar panels, and this is my business card holder. It's not a coincidence that it looks like a solar panel. Put that on top, and then your point of production and your point of consumption aren't miles and miles and miles and miles and miles and miles apart, connected by transmission lines that never get ice on them, because we know that never happens, and they never get blown down in windstorms or tornadoes, because there's never tornadoes in Texas. It's just stupid. And maybe I would just like to suggest that organizations with the power and reach of the Sierra Club start talking up market-based solutions and say, hey, people write letters to Walmart. People write letters to the Kroger Corporation or HEB, which is exactly based in or corporate headquarters in Kerrville. They have lots of parking lots. You put up charging stations for electric vehicles, like this beautiful piece of steel behind me here. Okay, and that generates the load, the demand, and then to keep from moving the pollution from the tailpipe to the smokestack of a coal burning power plant or a natural gas plant, put them underneath solar carports and have row upon row. That's like, I don't know. Am I just that's too simple? Too simple.
You're right though, and if you all want evidence of what Ryan's talking about, look at the several increase in production orders that have taken place for the Ford F-150 Lightning. That vehicle is in massive demand, more than they ever expected. Their whole marketing campaign was directed at us. Hey, you want to keep the lights on in your state? When power goes out, plug your truck into your house and you'll be good to go. People are flipping for that thing. They want it, right? So that's one thing I encourage, that us all, we work together. We're going to form at the chapter, and I invite you all to join a clean energy, equitable clean energy committee for volunteers like yourself, where you can work with your local groups and you can work with other groups around the state to come up with ideas for how we do things like this. But we want to target, especially in your community, consumers. We want people who are paying bills to turn that into advocacy as much as they can. Just like you would write a letter to your politician, write a letter to your energy provider, whether it's Encore, whether it's TXU, Green Mountain Energy, whatever, NRG. We need to be working together to make sure that we're pushing back. And there's a lot of things that can be done, but we have to bring people together. I hate to tell you, I've got a lot of respect and adoration for the Sierra Club. When it comes to the halls of power, we are at the bottom of the rung. We do not have the influence in the state capitol like you would think. Even though we have more than 100,000 members and supporters in the state, it's about money talking. They listen to the dollars, like Bob was saying, whether they're on the left, or the right, or the center. Now, if more people are engaged, that starts to change. But on any issue you look at, it all comes down to campaign finance. So there's a lot we can do locally, though. That's what we want to really emphasize. We are going to do some, we're getting close to time. I want to put something on y'all's calendars. January 29th is the state chapter, Lone Star chapter XCOM meeting. That's always, we always welcome members to attend. It's not the most exciting thing, but in the afternoon, we're going to be doing some workshops. Time is not set for certain, but right now one is definitely going to be at 3 p.m. And one of the workshops I want to organize is talking a little bit more about this, about our clean energy opportunities. How can we build a community of Sierra Club members to work at the local level, but connecting with other groups in San Antonio, Austin, Houston, the Rio Grande Valley, Dallas, etc. Another workshop we'll be doing that we've got to prepare with David Griggs and Matt Johnson, our political director, is about the 2022 political cycle. We'll be inviting folks who are involved in that work or want to get involved in that work to come join and learn about the program, who we've endorsed, how we'll be getting out and advocating for environmental champions at the city, county, state, and federal level. One thing I failed to mention about the clean energy work, we want to also look at engaging school districts as well to try and get more clean energy on schools, to green schools, weatherized schools. There's a big push in different communities like San Antonio and Houston to make schools hubs, emergency hubs for when we have catastrophic winter weather or heat waves or droughts or floods, that schools can be places for people to evacuate to, because most communities have one nearby. So there's a lot of fun, interesting stuff that we can do together. Mark your calendars and you can drop me a note. My email is, I'll put it here in the chat, david.cortez@sierraclub.org. And you can find me on social media, Austin by Chuco. save those. Drop me a note. We'll follow up, and love to talk to y'all some more. Any last minute thoughts or anything that anyone wants to share?
Well, we're just about out of time now, Dave.
Sounds good, Dan. Well, I just want to thank you all again for your, this is heavy stuff, and try to find a way to make it relatable. There's much more to read about, but I am really excited if you do meet in April in person, I would love to get up there and see you all. I feel like I haven't left town in ages. But everyone, please stay safe. Do what you got to do to take care of yourself and your family. This is tough times right now. So thank you for your attention and energy today.
Thanks very much, Dave, for a very interesting presentation. A lot to think about, a lot more we could do. So we'll look to hear from you about how we can get involved here with the chapter on some of the stuff you want to do in the future.
Yes.
Great.
So
thanks, Joe.
At this point, I think we're done for tonight. Thanks everybody for attending. Thanks for hosting, John.
You are welcome.
If there are
Hey, John.
people,
Yes.
Would you leave us on for 5 minutes if anybody wants to chit chat like we were at a real meeting?
Oh, yeah. I don't leave until everybody leaves.
this was a real meeting. We at one point had 41 people in attendance, which is just as good
about
as
42, actually, wasn't it?
I saw 42 on the list.
Maybe
That's
43.
as good as we usually do at Brookhaven. So I think the lesson is, if you have an interesting talk, we'll get just as many people on these Zoom meetings as we get in person. They're so much easier to attend, to get to, and it's so much easier for people. I'm not suggesting that we never meet in person again, but anyway.
I don't know. I think you were. Anyway, we're going to end the meeting. Is that right?
Yes, and you're gonna allow people to stick around to chit chat with each other. But at this point, I thank everybody, and I'm leaving. Good night, everybody.
Good night, Dan.
Night, everybody.
Good night.
Bye.
All right.
Bye.
Good night.
Who's going to stay with us? Who are the really hardcores tonight?
Well, I need to speak to Liz.
That's just by phone. Yeah, by phone.
Okay. Well, then we're leaving the meeting, though. Thank you, everyone.
All right, Renee, are you calling me?
I'm gonna let you call me.
Me call you? Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
Night, everybody.
Talk to y'all later. Good night.
All right.
Good night,
Okay.
Susan.
Hey,
Good to
Hey,
see
Dave.
everybody.
hey, where'd Dave just disappeared.
All right. Let's see. We got a few people left. I guess we, for those of you who are not, totally attuned to what's been going on for the last, I don't know, however long since Ken Kramer's been gone from chapter. There's a long process, we went through, David, how many did we go through between Ken Kramer and Dave Cortez? Three executive directors?
You're muted, Dave.
You're muted, David.
We had Shalene first, and then Reggie, and then the interim with Cyrus.
Yeah, with
Actually, he was
Cyrus.
interim both times, and then now Dave.
Well, thank goodness for Cyrus being interim, and
Yeah.
I would never want to name names. I will reverse this and make it totally positive. Thank the environmental gods and any other gods we want to talk about for Dave Cortez, and that we have him to face this incredibly complex part of our history.
Yes, I agree. One thing he did not bring up in his talk, and I thought he would, was the state legislature making that huge gift to the utilities and the gas companies and the pipeline owners for all of their damages that they suffered during the big freeze, and piling it on us, the ratepayers, for the next 30 years. Those bonds that they use to finance the gift to all these people who caused this problem. And my children and grandkids will be paying for that in their rate bills for the next 30 years. God, boom. Still irritates me thinking about it.
Yeah, it's, that's obviously the difference between it being a true public utility where you have the public's good supposedly versus private businesses that, seem to be able to skim that little 100 mil right off the top somehow for their executive compensation.
Who's the guy in the news? Who's the guy in the newspaper? Is it Dave Lieber, who's the watchdog?
Oh yeah.
He says the Public Utility Commission does not deserve the name public. It's just a utility commission.
Yeah. So, hey, Ryan, where are you at? What location are you at, Ryan?
Hey, so I am on a contract in Dallas, in Louisville right now, joining you from the beautiful Holiday Inn, but I lived in the Dallas area and moved up to Boulder, Colorado back in February of 2018. I've been down here for about a month and a half now.
Wow.
Well, we appreciate your, we really do appreciate your expertise. Yeah. Environmentalists, if anything I've learned along the way is that, you need to be a chemical engineer. You need to be an electrical engineer. You need to have all these science backgrounds, but most of us don't. Most of us aren't math majors. We're just good-hearted people that are trying to do the right thing, but it sure helps to have a numbers person and a science person.
Feel free to hit me up anytime. My master's thesis at UT was the application of discrete mathematics. It's a field of math in climate change modeling. So
really? Wow.
I've been yakking about this like 3 degrees. 3 degrees is a pipe dream. That's not going to happen. You're talking 8 degrees. And when your global average temperature change by 2060 is 8 degrees centigrade, it's massive and it's so dangerous. So now, thankfully, finally, people are starting to pay attention, and not to say that there's been really any good impact of COVID, and but it has given people the time to step back, pause, and to think about this. So maybe we'll get it. Hey, can I tell the group a little bit about what we're doing in September of this year and in September 2024?
Tell us.
Okay, so my full-time job, I write software for EV charging stations. Apart from that, avocationally or on a volunteer basis, I work as a PR director for the EV Angelist. Anybody here known or heard of Buzz Smith? Nope. Okay. Well, Richard, aka Buzz Smith, was the #1 top-selling salesperson for electric vehicles of all makes and models in the state of Texas from his from his office at Classic Chevrolet in Grapevine, Texas, 6 years running. I met Buzz through the North Texas Electric Auto Association. And what we want to do is 2 road trips in an electric truck. Now, the first will be this coming September from Denver to Olympia, Washington, going across 3 red states, Utah, Idaho, and then on the way back through Wyoming, and 3 blue states, Colorado, Oregon, and Washington. And the idea is to talk to people about the importance of, hey, you can drive an electric vehicle. And if climate change is not your thing, because you can talk to some conservatives, you say the word climate change or global warming, after that, they have you hit the off switch on their brain.
Yeah,
they hear
the end of it.
Yeah, they hear Charlie Brown's teacher. Wah, 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 wah. But if you talk to them about, hey, you can have a massive jobs creation program, building these banks of EV charging stations. I'm not talking, 3 here, 4 here, 2 here, to electrify America, which God only knows how they managed to spend $3 billion that way. But okay. The big C word, consultant, seems to come always to mind. A consultant must have been in there to suck up all the money away from the people that actually twist wrenches and do something worthwhile. But, You talk to them about massive jobs creation, putting in 50 to 70 charging stations in a pre-existing parking lot, located 35 to 50 miles separated from each other at those intervals on US interstates. Suddenly what you have is the 2030s, 2020s equivalent of the railroad. We have in southwestern Colorado all kinds of ghost towns, towns that are completely abandoned from the 1920s, 1930s, and before, when after the silver was gone, after the gold was gone, after the copper was gone, there's no reason to be there, and the railroad didn't go through. But when the railroad did go through those towns, and people could stop, the train took on coal and water for the boiler, and people could stop and stay at a hotel for the night and get cleaned up and maybe shop a little bit, you know, look around, maybe they'd found a business, start a business there themselves. Those towns became Dallas.
So the whole, like, sort of the G. Harvey model. So what I'm hearing you say is that if we do increase and expand the charging stations, people will feel more at ease taking off across country, and each little stop will create more jobs in that little town.
I couldn't have said it better myself. You got it.
Okay.
So we do that in 2022 September. We do that trip across, and then in 2024 we do the trip from Dallas to Washington D.C. Now, it's not by mistake that we picked those two times, because it's 6 weeks prior to the midterm elections and 6 weeks prior to the presidential election. Now, who remembers a great movie by, probably the best actor of all time? I'm a little biased. Jimmy Stewart.
Which movie?
Mr. Smith Goes to Washington.
Of course.
Okay. Yeah, EV Road Trip Movie 1 is where the rubber meets the road. It's a documentary talking to people, average, everyday people. How is the advent of the electric vehicle going to change your life? And then EV Road Trip Movie 2 is subtitled Mr. Smith Goes to Washington.
Love it.
Put those up there, and man, if we could get a big crowd of folks from the Dallas Sierra Club to see us off, or as we go, we'll publish the map, where we're going to be. There's a good chance that people, if someone here knows someone in Sherman, knows someone in Jackson, Mississippi, knows somebody in Atlanta, Georgia. We get that kind of, and it's when you go there and we plan to meet with, or would like to meet with the U.S. Secretary of Transportation, Pete Buttigieg. We'd like to meet with the Secretary of Energy or a representative from the DOE. Meet that, give them, and because that's what politicians want, is they want, some screen time. I'm happy to give them some screen time. Get on there, stay in, and as they say in Texas, you don't change horses in the midstream, right? We don't change horses in the midstream.
No.
That's what we got to do. Got to keep the right people in office.
Yeah. Let me ask you a side question on electric vehicles. Does the semiconductor chip shortage affect EVs the same that it is all the other manufacturers of gas powered vehicles?
Yes, it does.
Okay.
No more, but no less.
Okay.
And that again is an argument for that again is an argument that really plays well to the conservatives. Is we've basically been shooting ourselves for the last 30, 40 years by offshoring all these operations. We don't build things. We don't build things here. That's one of those arguments that if you talk to, the more left side of the aisle, they're like, okay, I'm building it here, building blah, blah, blah. But you tell that to a conservative, you might as well just lay a big plate of banana pudding right in front of him. He's going to eat that up.
Yeah, we definitely, there's no question that we sold our manufacturing soul to, don't call it the devil. We did it voluntarily, and we sold it to every other country who was willing to take it.
And there's a good reason for that. Look at, I know that the components of the Dow Jones Industrial Average have changed since 1990. The 1988 is when I first went to college. I had to drop out in 1990 to go serve 7 years in the Army to pay for the rest of college. And then I came back and finished my bachelor's, went to my master's and finished that way, got it all done by 2000. But anyway, the Dow Jones Industrial Average back in 1990 was below 2,800. Now it's up over 35,000. And the only way that happens is we worship the quarterly earnings report, so that, you know, we're about at the end of the first month, Q1 in 2022 here. If you go on a calendar reporting, a fiscal calendar, if you do that, then notice that the Dow Jones Industrial Average has increased 13-fold. At the same time, where the minimum wage, where I used to make $4.75 an hour, it's now $7.25 an hour. And if you think that $1 in 2022 spends the same way the dollar in 1992, I have some beachfront property in Scottsdale, Arizona for you. You know, it's bunk. So we got to stop that. That's the message to sell the conservatives.
Yeah.
All right.
So, all right. You and I are doing all the talking. Anybody else want to do some post meeting? LeBeau, we're so glad to see you. Glad to see you smiling. I recognize your house back there.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
Where are you, LeBeau?
Well, I just want to ask Ryan.
I'm down in Oak Cliff in Dallas.
Oak Cliff? Okay. Sorry, David.
No, I was going to follow up with you, Ryan. I was interested in your your trip. You say you're going to do it in September of this year?
In September from Denver to Olympia.
Okay.
And then in September 2024 from Dallas to Washington, D.C.
Okay. Well, keep us posted on that. We might want to get the word out.
Yeah.
Good deal.
I will put my email address and contact information. I put my LinkedIn earlier up in the comments, but Ryan at the EV dash. Spell it right. Yep.
All right. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So you're in the charging business, and you should know, are they continuing to build charging stations? I mean, is that part of the industry growing properly?
It is, and Rivian, which now Rivian, I will say, kind of got a love-hate relationship with them because they're 40% owned by Darth Bezos. You know.
Darth Bezos.
A question.
Darth Bezos.
Question.
It is what it is. Sometimes you have to dance with the devil.
How long does it normally take to charge a vehicle at one of these charging stations?
It depends upon the type of charging station, and it depends upon the battery. Sometimes it's the size of the spoon, and sometimes it's the size of the baby's mouth. A level 2 charging station on average will give you a charge of about 25 to 30 miles of range per hour that you're plugged in. A DC fast charge station, hey, that's actually a good thing, and I'll tell you why.
All right.
But a DC, or a direct current fast charging station, you can get as fast as a full 250-mile range in my Chevy Bolt. It's supposed to get 238, but it gets 250. And I can get that as fast as about an hour and 15 minutes.
So while you're eating lunch, while you're eating dinner, you get a full charge.
So now along the electric corridor, as we conceived this being groups of charging stations located on pre-existing parking lots. Okay, well, you stop at a gas station. You stop at a gas station and you put the nozzle in, and 3 to 5 minutes later, you have completely filled your 15 to 22 gallon tank. That's the average. You might have time to go in and get a Slurpee, and some, ho-hos or ding-dongs or whatever, health food, right? You have contributed to the local economy, maybe $4? Because most of that money from the gas goes back to the oil companies that made the gas.
There's almost no profit. Almost no profit on the gas.
No profit. And so the owner of a convenience store makes all of his money from overpriced Twinkies and Doritos and all that stuff. That's how much you've contributed to the local economy. Let's do this. Let's say I get to park in the shade of a solar carport, and Walmart will give me an hour if I'll buy an hour. And then I'll go in and I'll sit down in the Walmart in a real restaurant, not an Auntie Anne's, not a Subway, not a Mickey D's, but a 54th Street or a Chili's. And I'll sit down, I'll order my food on a tablet computer. And then once I've submitted that order, now I go and hit my grocery menu. And I order, and then I place an order for my toothpaste, my toothbrush, my laundry detergent, the dishwashing soap, all that kind of stuff that you don't want to squeeze and maul it and see what it looks like. All the produce, all the fresh milk, meat, cheese, all that stuff, that happens somewhere else. But this is the supermarket of the future. Now you order this via a tablet computer, and then you can say, do you want curbside delivery? It costs a 3% upcharge. Well, your groceries cost $150. By the time you got on to the end of it, 3% is $4.50. Oh, yeah. I don't want to carry all that crap out to the car by myself. I'll have someone put it into a recyclable crate, just like they do at Costco. They don't give you plastic bags. They give you their old cardboard boxes, which is brilliant. That's an absolutely freaking brilliant model. So do that. Now, what is your contribution to the local economy then? Well, at least $150 as opposed to the $5, $6 that you contributed, as you're driving through town. Now you've turned it into, oh, okay, this is cool. So manifold benefits for local businesses. And that, again, that's the model that's what you have to sell to the conservatives is this will mean jobs growth. This will mean people stay in your little town rather than deciding that, who wants to live in Midland, Texas? Not a soul. When the oil finally and dries up out of Midland, Texas, no one wants to live there. And I know this because I used to be in the Texas Army National Guard, and we drove in long convoys out to Fort Bliss, the single most inappropriately named place on the planet. That was a good joke, but okay.
That's a very good joke.
John is from, I can tell the look on John's face. He's like from West Texas, right?
Who, this John?
This John Lingenfelder.
West Texas? No.
Okay. I said who wants to live in Midland, and John's like,
we've all
okay. Well, glad.
Been there, but I didn't live there.
Yeah. Once you have fracked the hell out of Midland and the Permian shale, no one's going to be there. There's no good reason. A whole way of life goes away.
I've heard so many stories about that area out there in the Permian Shale, about the trucks, the roads, the fracking going on, that it's become uninhabitable. You can't drive out there. I understand third hand, but when I was back there long time ago, I thought it was really, I actually did think it was beautiful country. I don't want to see it now.
Oh, no, that's changed.
It has changed. It is so different. Going in convoys from Austin, where like way back when I lived in Austin and was in the Texas Army National Guard, and we'd do the annual training, or what the National Guard sometimes calls summer camp. You go into a 2-weeker out in the sand pit in Fort Bliss, and it's like, that was actually okay. I enjoyed that. It was the driving in a convoy at 45 miles an hour. Why does the Army want to go so slow? Don't you want to hurry up and get this done and over with? No.
I don't believe there was no air conditioning in the old trucks, was there?
No. What are you talking about air conditioning?
Sorry, I didn't. I was just making sure.
And, neither in the Army's version of the Chevy S10, what they called a Cut V, or the Humvee, was there any air conditioner. So we had.
Nor was there in Air Force convoys either.
Really?
We rigged up personal battery powered fans. We'd buy a big sack of, like a 10-pound sack of ice, and put that into a bucket and let the fan blow over the ice, so that, because you're in full battle rattle. You got all the uniform with the sleeves rolled down. It's like, It's like 100 and oh my God outside. And there's no wind coming in this truck at all. What? Yeah. I did what you did what you could to survive.
Ryan, thank you for joining us tonight. It's been a wonderful evening.
I really enjoyed it.
There's Carolyn joining us for a second. Oh, she's muted, but she's saying hi to us. All right, good to see everybody. I'm out of here.
Okay,
Bye.
take care.
Good night.
Good night.
Thanks, John. Thanks, everybody.
Hey, you're welcome, everybody.
I'm the leave here. Leave.
Well, if nobody else wants to say anything, then I am going to say good night all and end the meeting. So